Minimalism is kind of an abstract idea, I suppose, but I think whenever the idea of minimalism shows up, it's about living simply and having fewer things around you and focusing very specifically on what is in front of you and appreciating what's there, whatever is there in front of you. So I think often it's about simplifying and narrowing things down and just being aware of yourself and your surroundings. I think that's fundamentally what it's about. The reason that I wrote the book, when I started writing, I was noticing that the word minimalism was being used to describe a whole different range of things. Like there were minimalist skincare products and minimalist houses and minimalist lamps and minimalist furniture and minimalist lifestyle. So I started to wonder why the word minimalism, which had started in art history, had become this totally omnipresent term. And it seemed to be a marketing term. Like everything seemed to be sold as being minimalist, and that's why you were supposed to buy it, which seemed kind of paradoxical to me, because minimalism shouldn't be about just buying a thing because it's being marketed to you. So I think the idea of minimalism, and certainly the word minimalism, has been totally commodified as this branding mechanism to make something seem popular or cool or new. So I think, when someone sees a minimalist lamp or something at a furniture store, they don't connect it back to modernist architecture or artists in New York in the 60s and 70s. I think they just see it and they think of maybe Instagram or, just a popular trend. So I hope to provide more context for it and show that it does have a background, because I think often minimalism is just presented as coming from nothing and having no connection to anything. When people were stuck at home during the pandemic and were suddenly forced to just confront what was immediately around them, I think minimalism became a much more present idea. Like quarantine and being stuck in one place did make people totally reevaluate their material circumstance, and I think minimalism is like a useful tool or idea to go through that process. The style of minimalism has kind of eclipsed the ideas, so I think people forget about the original idea of minimalism, which was engaging with what's in front of you and like seeing something in a different way. So instead of that, they just see it as the aesthetic to consume. They see it as something pre-made, maybe. I think the minimalist artists originally in the 60s and 70s were taking materials and styles that were not seen as beautiful and showing people a way to see them as beautiful. But now, decades later, we've already internalized that, and those things have just become commercial products again. The idea of engagement and being closer to your surroundings kind of gets lost in the ability to just buy a product that already looks like that. But I think, one thing that has changed a lot in the past few decades is the internet and like the rise of portable digital technology and social media. And I do think that the overflow of content on our phones and on our laptops kind of makes you focus less on your physical surrounding, because there's like so much noise and content and imagery on your phone. You would like your interior space to be much simpler and not distracting to you. The physical style and physical products have like gone the opposite direction of the digital. So it's kind of like the things that we have in physical space don't look like the internet at this point, maybe. Like we want simpler spaces and more austerity and less to hold us down. And then on the internet, we get the opposite, which is like noise and chaos and low quality JPEGs. Maybe we get so much stimulus from that then the minimalist aesthetic in the physical world is much more compatible. But I think it's also, the millennial generation, like we grew up on the internet, we grew up with digital technology. So I think there's also this nostalgia for like earlier eras of the internet. And our sensibilities and our tastes were like defined by the internet in the 90s and early 2000s. And I think people are returning to that as they get older. And that's why we appreciate like low quality images or like silly memes, is because it references those earlier times. I mean, the ultimate like millennial space seems to be like a studio for one person, or like a hotel room or an Airbnb, where it's just you like surrounded by only a few things, and you have your laptop and your phone chargers, and you can just like be online in a very clean way. Globalization has happened through the digital platforms now, and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Tumblr or many other social networks, like these are American companies, and I think they follow American norms often and are directed toward American ways of existing. Sadly, social media has decreased diversity in a lot of ways, or it has erased a lot of specificity between different places, because suddenly we all have the same frame of reference. Like on Airbnb, or at least my argument about Airbnb is that it kind of establishes the same aesthetic of space no matter where you go. So you can find a minimalist Airbnb in like Bali or Beijing or New York or Madrid or wherever you go, there's this same kind of style of space. And I think the platform connects us, but also homogenizes those tastes, so everyone kind of comes to desire the one thing that's on the platform. We create and consume so much content on the internet, and we live our lives so digitally, that I think it's only natural that the physical spaces would just be a surface for that existence. Like particularly now in quarantine or in the pandemic, when you live so much of your life on the internet, that's just where you come to express yourself and where you find connections to people who are like you and where you develop your taste. And so I think that makes empty spaces maybe even more appealing. I do think the internet decontextualizes things. Like it disconnects culture from where the culture came from often. So you see a beautiful piece of art on Instagram, but you have no idea who made it or where it came from or what its history is. So I think that the internet now needs much more context, and we need to be more accustomed to looking for the context and kind of doing our own research to figure out why we like what we like, instead of just following the algorithmic feed of like a Netflix homepage or your Instagram recommendations. So I think part of my job is to provide more of that context and think about how things became popular, I suppose. A lot of my work, I think, is looking at something that is popular and that people do find appealing right now, and then figuring out where that came from and what its history is. So I hope that in the future there are more platforms and more digital spaces that can provide more context and not just provide consumption, but education, and allow you to discover more things for yourself and kind of pursue a body of culture. There is more writing than ever now. I mean, you see the internet is a great place for publishing words. More people are writing pieces and posting things than ever. I don't think that ecosystem is necessarily very good. But I do see the rise of podcasts and the rise of video essays or YouTubers as a totally different form of criticism and thinking than we had in writing and in literary publishing, I suppose. But I don't think that's worse at all. I think there's really fascinating, ways you can provide context or educate people or find education in a podcast or even in a 1-minute TikTok video of someone explaining something, on their phone. I find that a really powerful form. And I think as there are more multimedia creation tools and video editing and audio recording, that will be even easier to produce more of, and will kind of evolve a richer culture of video essays and of interesting audio projects. So I think that was a relatively recent shift away from chronology toward more algorithmic feeds. And I think that just makes us even more passive consumers of culture and information. And we tend to just now look at whatever's at the top of the list and not even think about what's not getting recommended or think about what else might be out there that we're not seeing. So I'm hoping that there'll be kind of a shift away from those kinds of feeds and toward more customizable or more controllable ways of consuming stuff. So whether that's like a pure chronology, or is it a magazine that curates things for you, or is it one writer writing a newsletter that you like, and that's how you can find the new things that you like. Archives are more important than ever, and there's so much material out there and so much multimedia that needs to be highlighted again and shown to people, and that's almost as important a job now as producing the new thing and finding the latest thing that's out there. So I think that process becomes really important, and there's so much value in the things that already exist. Yeah. We were used to that idea in books, I think. Like a book from decades ago is obviously valuable. But on the internet, we tend to think that the only valuable things are what happened this week or today. Formative experience of my own on the internet was pirating stuff in the late 90s, early 2000s. And that, like, you were able to find so many niche things and so many things that would have been inaccessible otherwise because other people cared about them. Like, they cared enough to upload some obscure anime with like translated subtitles, and that was what kept it alive and kept it moving. And I hope that more things like that could be developed. When I think about algorithmic feeds or like automated feeds, it's the message is that it's personalized for you. So it's a list of stuff that you are supposed to like, that is just for you. Like the TikTok feed is called the For You feed. Yeah, and it's like, you only know what you are seeing, and that tends to isolate you from everyone else because you don't know what they're seeing. It's like a less communal experience than maybe an old internet forum or like a BitTorrent piracy thing, because in those contexts, you kind of know what everyone's talking about and what they're interested in and what they're consuming. So I do think it's like, we're all gathered onto the same platforms more and more, but the experience is more and more atomized, which is a pretty bizarre paradox. The Glass House was Philip Johnson's personal house in Connecticut and built in the 1940s, I think, late 1940s. And so it's just like a glass cube set into the landscape. And I think, maybe that's a good metaphor for our iPhones as well. Like, it's an individual glass box, and you look out of it, and you are kind of in your own little environment, in your bubble, surrounded by things that you appreciate and like, but you're not outside of it. It's like, it's a isolating and like solo environment that's only meant for you. Maybe the Bilbao effect of the internet is kind of what draws you to a platform. So what is the thing that makes you start using it? And right now you're seeing all of the platforms compete over talent. So TikTok pays someone from YouTube to move off of YouTube and move on to TikTok. And the kind of great content creators are the attraction of the platform. And all the platforms kind of have their own structures and systems, so you kind of have to adapt to each one. But I think, you almost see a mode of like platform tourism or marketing where you kind of have to choose where you're directing your attention, or, just like a city tries to attract you with an amazing museum, like the platform will try to attract you with an amazing content creator or like a new element, like the TikTok feed, or like, even if you're not on the internet, even if you're not looking at your phone, that system has influenced what restaurants exist around you. It influences where you're going, how you're connecting to people. So we're kind of always within the space of the internet.